April 23, 1945. 4:47 in the morning. Camp Beaumont Medical Facility, Louisiana. Dr. Samuel Morrison lifted the scalpel and looked at the German woman on his table. Her baby had been dead inside her for 6 hours. At least that's what Nazi propaganda had told her would happen. That Americans would let her die in agony. That enemy prisoners deserved no mercy. Instead, two American surgeons were about to perform emergency surgery to save her life and possibly the child's. But that's not the part that shocked everyone. The shocking part came 3 days later, when a baby no bigger than a loaf of bread opened her eyes for the first time and looked directly at the enemy doctor who'd saved her life. What happened in that moment would echo across 3 generations and prove that some choices matter more than nationality. Before we tell you this remarkable true story of life, death, and the mercy that transcends war, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. These forgotten accounts from World War II deserve to be remembered and shared. Now let's go back to the beginning. 5 days earlier, April 18th, 1945. The spring rain fell cold over Camp Beaumont, Louisiana, turning the red clay roads into rivers of mud. The war in Europe was ending. Hitler's Reich was collapsing. But for the women arriving at the camp that morning, the future remained terrifyingly uncertain. They stepped off military trucks in small groups, their civilian clothes soaked through their faces blank with exhaustion. Margaret Kleist was among them, though she moved more slowly than the others. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly, now 7 months round. She was 24 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, her face still pretty, despite the hollow cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. She had been a nurse in Berlin before the war consumed everything. Head nurse at Charité Hospital obstetrics ward. She'd delivered over 200 babies before the bombs started falling. Now she was a prisoner carrying a child conceived in the chaos of a collapsing Reich. Her husband Ernst had been killed at Dresden in February. She'd received the telegram 3 weeks after the fact. No body, no grave, just words on paper telling her she was a widow. The other women glanced at her stomach with a mixture of pity and discomfort. Pregnancy in captivity was a burden no one wanted to acknowledge. Some whispered that she was foolish to have carried it this far. Others said nothing at all, their silence heavy with judgment. The camp spread before them, a sprawling compound of wooden barracks surrounded by fences and guard towers. American soldiers stood at intervals, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. The sight should have been terrifying according to everything Greta had been taught, but she was too tired to feel fear anymore. She had felt nothing but exhaustion for weeks ever since the journey began. First the chaos of surrender, then the long transport across France, the ship across the Atlantic, and finally this arrival in a country she had been taught to hate. The rain had a different smell here than in Germany, cleaner somehow mixed with pine, and something sweet she couldn't identify. The ground beneath her feet was damp and giving, not the hard cobblestones of Berlin or the frozen mud of the Eastern Front. Even the sounds were foreign. Birds she didn't recognize, called from nearby trees. The guards spoke in drawling English she could barely understand. Their voices neither cruel nor kind, just matter of fact. As they were led toward the processing building, Greta noticed the food smell first. It drifted from somewhere inside the camp. Real cooking, not the watery soup or stale bread they had survived on during the journey. Her stomach clenched with hunger so sharp it made her dizzy. The baby kicked in response, a flutter against her ribs that reminded her she was eating for two, or trying to. She placed her hand over the movement, feeling the reassuring push of a tiny foot or elbow. The baby had been active for weeks, constantly shifting and turning. It was the only comfort she had left, proof that despite everything, something inside her was still alive and fighting. Inside the processing building, American officers sat behind desks with stacks of forms and typewriters. One by one, the women were called forward to give their names, ages, and backgrounds. When Greta's turn came, she walked slowly to the desk, very aware of how obvious her pregnancy was. The officer, a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, looked up from his paperwork and paused. He spoke in careful German, his accent thick but understandable. "When are you due, June?" Greta replied quietly. "Early June." The officer made a note on his form, then looked at her again. His expression was unreadable. "Are you having any problems? Any pain?" Greta shook her head, though that wasn't entirely true. She had felt cramping on and off for days, sharp twinges that came and went without warning. But she was afraid to complain. afraid that any problem would make her more of a burden than she already was. Prisoners who became too much trouble disappeared. She had seen it happen in Germany. "We have a doctor here," the officer said. "You should see him tomorrow. Make sure everything is okay." Greta nodded surprise. She had expected indifference at best, cruelty at worst. This casual concern felt like a trap, something to lull her into a false sense of safety before the real punishment began. The women were taken to the delousing station, a process Greta had dreaded. She had heard stories of humiliation of women forced to strip and stand naked while guards watched. But when her turn came, she found only female nurses waiting, not soldiers. They were efficient, but not unkind. They gave her soap that smelled like lavender, towels that were actually clean, and a simple cotton dress to replace her filthy travel clothes. The hot water of the shower was a shock. Greta stood under the stream, letting it wash away weeks of grime. She hadn't felt hot water in 18 months. In Berlin, there was no fuel to heat anything. People washed in cold water if they washed at all. For the first time in months, she felt almost human again. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby shift and settle. "We're going to be okay," she whispered in German. "We have to be." But she didn't believe it. How could she? She was a prisoner in an enemy country, alone and pregnant. Everything she owned fit in a small cloth bag. The baby growing inside her was all she had left, and she was terrified of losing it. The next morning, true to the officer's word, she was taken to the camp medical facility. It was a long, low building painted white with red crosses on the roof. Inside, it smelled like antiseptic and something else she couldn't place. Cleanliness, perhaps, or just the absence of death. The doctor was an American Army captain named Samuel Morrison. He was in his late 40s with graying temples and steady hands that moved with the confidence of someone who had seen too much suffering to be shocked by any of it. He spoke fluent German, his accent barely noticeable, and his manner was professional without being cold. There was a photograph on his desk, a young blonde girl, maybe 3 years old, smiling at the camera. The photo was old, the edges worn from handling. Morrison caught Greta looking at it, but said nothing. "Lie down, please," he said, gesturing to the examination table. "I need to check the baby." Greta hesitated, then did as she was told. The table was covered with clean paper that crinkled beneath her. "Doctor." Morrison placed his stethoscope on her belly, moving it slowly from one side to the other. He frowned, adjusted the position. Tried again. The silence stretched too long. "Is something wrong?" Greta asked, her voice tight with fear. "The heartbeat is there," Dr. Morrison said carefully. "But it's not as strong as I'd like. When did you last feel the baby move?" Greta tried to remember. The movements had been so constant for so long that she had stopped really noticing them. Now, trying to recall, she realized with growing horror that she couldn't remember the last time she had felt that reassuring kick or flutter. "Yesterday," she whispered. "I think. Maybe the day before." Dr. Morrison's expression remained neutral, but Greta could read the concern in his eyes. Her nursing training kicked in. She knew what a weak fetal heartbeat meant. She knew what no movement meant. "I want to keep an eye on this," he said. "Come back tomorrow. If you notice any bleeding, any severe pain, or if the baby doesn't move, you come immediately." "Do you understand?" Greta nodded, but a cold dread was already settling into her chest. Something was wrong. She could feel it now, an emptiness where there should have been life. The mess hall was a revelation. Long tables filled with food. Real food, not scraps or rations, but actual meals. Greta took a tray and moved through the line, watching as servers piled her plate with fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and cornbread. There was milk, real milk, cold and white in a glass pitcher. She sat at a table with other women, most of whom ate in stunned silence. The woman next to her, older, with gray hair, was named Elsa Hartmann. She had been a midwife in Munich before the war. "This is more food than I've seen in 2 years, Elsa whispered to no one in particular. Greta ate slowly, her stomach protesting at first, after so long on minimal rations. The food was good, better than good. It was nourishment she desperately needed. But with every bite, the guilt grew heavier. Her mother was starving somewhere in the ruins of Berlin. Her younger sister had written months ago about making soup from tree bark. And here she sat a prisoner, eating better than she had in years. Nazi propaganda had told her that Americans were starving, desperate, eating sawdust bread, while their country collapsed under the weight of war. But they're giving me fried chicken, she thought. Real chicken, with crispy skin. The contradiction gnawed at her. That night in the barracks, lying on a cot with an actual mattress and two blankets, Greta placed her hand on her belly and waited. She pressed gently, willing the baby to respond. Nothing. She pressed harder, searching for any sign of movement. Still nothing. Panic rose in her throat, sharp and choking. She thought of Dr. Tur. Morrison's concerned expression, the way he had frowned while listening to the heartbeat. Something was wrong. She knew it now with terrible certainty. The next morning, she returned to the medical facility, walking as fast as her swollen feet would allow. Dr. Morrison saw the fear in her face immediately. No movement, he asked. She shook her head, tears already forming. Nothing since yesterday morning, not a single kick. Doctor, I think my baby is dead. The words came out broken, barely more than a whisper. Saying them aloud made them real, turned her worst fear into something solid and undeniable. Dr. Morrison guided her to the examination table, his face grave but not hopeless. Let me check. Don't jump to conclusions yet. He placed his stethoscope on her belly again, moving it carefully, searching. The seconds stretched into minutes. Greta stared at the ceiling, hardly daring to breathe. She counted the tiles above her. 12 across 8 down. 96 tiles total. She counted them twice. Finally, Dr. Morrison straightened up, and the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. There is a heartbeat, he said carefully. But it's very weak, much weaker than yesterday. 98 beats per minute. Greta's nursing training supplied the rest. Normal fetal heart rate was 120 to 160. 98 was dangerously low. What does that mean, she asked, though she already knew. Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down facing her. His expression was serious but kind. It means the baby is in distress. The placenta isn't working properly. It's not getting enough oxygen and nutrients. If it continues like this, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Greta had seen this before in the hospital in Berlin before the war. Placental insufficiency. Babies who didn't get enough oxygen didn't survive. And at 7 months, it was too early. The baby couldn't be born yet. Not here. Not in a prison camp with limited medical facilities. So my baby will die, she said flatly. Not necessarily, Dr. Morrison replied, but we need to monitor this very closely. I want you to come here every day, twice a day, if possible. And if anything changes, any pain, any bleeding, anything at all, you come immediately. Greta nodded numbly. She wanted to ask why he was bothering. She was a prisoner, an enemy. Her baby was German, the child of a dead soldier from a defeated army. Why would they care if it lived or died? But she couldn't form the words. All she could do was nod and try not to cry. That afternoon, another doctor appeared. Dr. Robert Fletcher, a surgeon in his mid-30s, tall and lean, with tired eyes and a Purple Heart ribbon on his uniform. He assisted Morrison with the examination, checking Greta's blood pressure and reflexes. The two doctors spoke in English, technical terms that Greta only partially understood. But she caught enough to know they were discussing how much time remained. 72 hours, maybe less, Fletcher said. Morrison nodded grimly. After the examination, the two doctors stepped outside. Greta could see them through the window, their conversation tense. Fletcher's body language was stiff, resistant. Morrison spoke quietly, gesturing with his hands. Finally, Fletcher nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Over the next 3 days, Greta lived in a state of suspended terror. She went to the medical facility twice daily, lying still, while Dr. Morrison checked the heartbeat. Each time it was a little weaker, 94 beats per minute, then 87, then 78. Dr. Morrison's frown grew deeper with each examination. Dr. Fletcher was there, too silent and watchful, his face unreadable. Between medical visits, Greta tried to participate in camp life as much as her pregnancy allowed. The women were given light work assignments. Laundry, kitchen, help cleaning. Greta was excused from most of it due to her condition, which only added to her guilt. She felt useless, a burden, taking up space and resources while contributing nothing. But the other women were surprisingly kind. They saved extra portions of food for her, knowing she was eating for 2. They helped her with simple tasks that had become difficult with her swollen belly. Elsa took particular interest in her condition. The American doctor, Elsa said one evening, as they sat on the barracks steps watching the sunset over the Louisiana pines, "He's trying to help you." "Yes," Greta replied. "I don't understand why, but yes. That's more than our own doctors would have done," Elsa said quietly. At the end in Munich, there were no doctors left, no medicine, no equipment, nothing. Women gave birth in cellars with no help at all. Many died, the babies too. Greta had heard similar stories. The Reich's grand promises had crumbled into nothing, leaving its people to suffer and die without help. And now here she was, a prisoner of the enemy, receiving better medical care than she would have gotten in her own country. On the evening of April 22nd, the fourth day since the baby had stopped moving, Greta lay in her cot, unable to sleep. The cramping had started again, sharper this time, more regular. She tried to ignore it, tried to breathe through it. But at 11:47 at night, she felt wetness between her legs. She reached down and her hand came away dark. Blood. Elsa, she gasped. Elsa, something's wrong. Elsa woke immediately, saw the blood and moved fast. She called for the guards, her voice sharp with urgency. Within minutes, Greta was being helped into a truck, driven through the dark camp roads to the medical facility. Dr. Morrison met them at the door, his hair mussed from sleep, but his eyes alert. Fletcher appeared moments later, pulling on his uniform jacket. They examined her quickly, their faces growing more serious with each passing moment. Morrison listened to the fetal heartbeat for what felt like an eternity. Greta watched his face, searching for any sign of hope. She saw none. Finally, he straightened up and looked at her directly. Mrs. Kleist, your baby is dying right now. The placenta has completely failed. Your body is trying to expel the baby because it recognizes that it's already functionally dead. If we do nothing, you'll go into labor within the next 2 to 3 hours and deliver a stillborn child. Greta felt the world tilt. Then it's over, she whispered. Unless we operate, Dr. Fletcher said quietly. Right now. Morrison turned to look at his colleague, surprise flickering across his face. Fletcher met his gaze steadily. Emergency cesarean section. Fletcher continued, speaking to Greta now. We extract the baby immediately, try to resuscitate. But you need to understand the risks. The baby is only 28 weeks, should be 40 weeks. Weight estimate is 2 to 3 pounds, should be 7 or 8. Lungs aren't fully developed. The baby won't be able to breathe independently. And we don't have a proper incubator, Morrison added. We'll improvise with an oxygen tent and heating lamps, but it's not ideal. Survival rate for a 28-week premature infant in a fully equipped hospital is maybe 60%. Here in these conditions, I'd say 15 to 20% chance. Maybe less. Greta absorbed this information, her nursing training helping her understand the clinical reality, even as her mother's heart screamed against it. What about me? She asked. Could I die? Morrison's expression didn't change. Yes, infection, hemorrhage, complications from anesthesia. You're malnourished, exhausted. Your body is already in crisis. I'd estimate 25% risk of maternal death. And we don't have full hospital facilities here. If something goes wrong, we have limited options. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. 12:14 in the morning. Greta placed both hands on her silent belly. She thought of Ernst's last words before he left for the front. Keep our child safe, Greta. Promise me. She had promised, and she had failed. The baby was dying inside her right now, but there was a chance. 15%, 20%. It didn't matter. It was more than zero. My baby is dying inside me right now, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. You're telling me there's a 15% chance it could live. If I do nothing, it's 0% chance. I understand the mathematics. I'm a nurse. I understand what you're telling me. She looked directly at Morrison, then at Fletcher. I made a promise to my husband before he died. I promised to protect our child. If that means I die trying, then at least I die keeping my promise. Do the surgery. Morrison and Fletcher exchanged a long look. Something passed between them, some unspoken agreement. Finally, Morrison nodded. All right, he said, let's bring this baby into the world. The next hour passed in a blur, surgical prep, sterilizing instruments, testing oxygen equipment. A nurse named Sarah Williams appeared calm and efficient, preparing the spinal anesthesia. Greta was wheeled into the operating room. The overhead light was painfully bright. Jazz music played softly on a radio in the corner, incongruous and surreal. Dr. Morrison scrubbed in, reviewing anatomy in his mind. Dr. Fletcher laid out surgical instruments with practiced precision. Nurse Williams checked and rechecked the oxygen supply. Greta lay on the table staring at the ceiling. The spinal block made her numb from the waist down. She could see Morrison and Fletcher's faces above the sheet they'd hung across her chest to block her view of the incision. She could hear their breathing, the clink of metal instruments, the soft sounds of the jazz radio. She thought of her mother in Berlin. She thought of her sister Clara. She thought of Ernst, buried somewhere in the ruins of Dresden. She thought of all the babies she had delivered in Berlin before the war, all the mothers who had trusted her to bring their children safely into the world. Now it was her turn to trust, to place her life and her baby's life in the hands of the enemy. Morrison positioned himself at her side, scalpel in hand. He looked down at her, his eyes kind, above his surgical mask. Ready. Mrs. Kleist. Greta nodded, unable to speak. The last thing she thought before Morrison made the first incision was a prayer. Not to God exactly. She wasn't sure she believed in God anymore after everything she'd seen. But a prayer to something. To fate. To chance. To whatever force in the universe decided who lived and who died. Please, she thought, let me hear crying. Just one cry. That's all I ask. Then Dr. Morrison pressed the scalpel to her belly, and there was no more time for prayer. The scalpel cut clean through skin and tissue. Greta felt pressure, but no pain. Just the strange sensation of being opened, of hands working inside her body. She could hear Morrison breathing steadily above the surgical mask, could hear Fletcher's quiet confirmations as he assisted. Skin incision clean, Morrison said in English. Through the fascia now. Greta stared at the ceiling, focusing on anything to keep from screaming. She counted them, again focusing on the numbers to keep from screaming. The jazz music continued its soft melody from the radio. Someone had left it on. She wondered if they knew, if they had done it on purpose to give her something else to focus on. Uterus is thin, Fletcher said, his voice tense. Very thin. Placenta looks necrotic. I can see the baby's head, Morrison replied. Bringing it up now, careful with the cord. There was a sound of fluid of tissue separating. Greta felt a sudden release of pressure, as if something heavy had been lifted from inside her. Her body felt lighter, emptier. Strange, then silence. Terrible, crushing silence. No crying, no sound at all except the jazz music and the pounding of her own heart in her ears. She tried to lift her head to see what was happening beyond the surgical sheet, but Nurse Williams gently pressed her shoulder back down. Stay still, Mrs. Kleist, Williams said in careful German. Let them work, but why isn't she crying? Greta asked, her voice breaking. Why can't I hear her? The silence continued. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Morrison's voice urgent now. Robert, take the baby. I need to control this bleeding. Fletcher moved quickly. Greta heard footsteps, heard the sound of something small being placed on a metal table. She heard Fletcher's voice, low and intense, speaking in rapid English. Not breathing. No respiratory effort. Starting stimulation. 20 seconds. 25 seconds. 30 seconds. Greta began to sob. Her baby was dead. Born dead. All of this, the surgery, the risk, everything, and her baby was dead anyway. Ernst's child. The last piece of him in the world. Gone. Come on, Fletcher said, and there was something desperate in his voice now. Come on, baby. Breathe. 35 seconds. 40 seconds. Morrison was still working on Greta, stitching something, his hands moving with a controlled urgency. She could feel him working, but she didn't care anymore. Let her bleed out. Let it end. Without the baby, what was the point? Come on, Fletcher said again louder. Breathe. 45 seconds. 50 seconds. Then so faint, Greta thought she imagined it a sound. A gasp. Weak, thin, barely audible over the jazz music. Another gasp. Then a cross, high-pitched, fragile but unmistakable. A baby crying. Greta's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. We have respiratory effort, Fletcher said, and his voice was shaking. Heart rate is climbing. 110, 115. She's breathing, Mrs. Kleist, Morrison said, and she heard the smile in his voice even though she couldn't see his face. You have a daughter, and she's alive. Greta couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She could only cry, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. A daughter, alive, breathing. Can I see her? She managed to gasp out between sobs. Please let me see her. There was a pause, a quiet consultation between the doctors. Then Nurse Williams came around the surgical sheet carrying a bundle wrapped in a white towel. She held it carefully as if it might break. Just for a moment, Williams said gently, Then we need to get her to the incubator. She lowered the bundle so Greta could see. The baby was impossibly small. Smaller than Greta had imagined, smaller than any baby she had delivered in Berlin. 2 pounds and 4 ounces, though Greta didn't know the exact weight yet. The length of a ruler, skin red and wrinkled, translucent enough that Greta could see the tiny veins beneath. The baby's eyes were fused shut, too premature to open. Her chest moved rapidly up and down, breathing fast, working hard. But she was moving. She was breathing. She was alive to him. "She's beautiful," Greta whispered. "She's perfect." The baby's tiny fist opened and closed, grasping at nothing. Her mouth moved, making small mewing sounds between cries. So fragile. So impossibly fragile. Then Williams carried her away, moving quickly toward the improvised incubator they had set up. An oxygen tent rigged from medical supply equipment, heating lamps positioned carefully around it. Not ideal, not what a premature baby needed, but the best they could do. Greta watched her daughter disappear behind a screen and felt panic rising again. "Don't leave me," she wanted to scream. "Don't take her away." But she knew they had to. The baby needed oxygen, needed warmth, needed constant monitoring. Morrison was still working on her, closing the incision with careful stitches. His hands moved steadily, but Greta could see sweat on his forehead above the mask. "How much blood has she lost?" Morrison asked Fletcher. "Too much," Fletcher replied quietly. "We need to work faster." Greta felt herself drifting, the world becoming soft and distant. The ceiling tiles blurred. The jazz music seemed to come from very far away. She heard Morrison's voice calling her name, heard urgency in it, but she was so tired. So impossibly tired. "Stay with me," Mrs. Clyce Morrison said firmly. "Stay awake. You need to stay awake." But the darkness was pulling at her, gentle and insistent. It would be so easy to let go, to sink into it. The baby was alive. That was all that mattered. Ernst's daughter was alive. She had kept her promise. Mrs. Clyce Morrison said again, sharper now. "Greta, look at me." She forced her eyes to focus on his face above her. "Your daughter needs you," he said. "You don't get to leave her now. Stay with me. Fight." And because he asked, because there was something in his voice that demanded obedience, she fought. She held on to consciousness by her fingernails, breathing through the exhaustion, the pain, the overwhelming urge to sleep. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Morrison straightened up. "We're done," he said. "She's stable." Greta was wheeled to a recovery room, a small space with a single bed and a window looking out onto the Louisiana pine trees. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. April 23rd, 1945, her daughter's birthday. She woke several hours later with a fever, 102.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Her incision throbbed with a deep burning pain that made her gasp when she tried to move. Nurse Williams was there immediately, checking her temperature, her pulse, examining the incision. Dr. Morrison came in a few minutes later, his face showing the exhaustion of a sleepless night. He peeled back the bandage carefully, and Greta saw his expression tighten. "There's inflammation around the incision," he said. "We're watching for infection." He left the room, briefly returned with Dr. Fletcher. The two men stood in the hallway just outside her door, their voices low but not quite low enough. Greta could hear every word. "That's penicillin meant for our combat troops," Fletcher said. "We have limited supply. If we use it on her and run out, then we run out." Morrison interrupted. "But I'm not letting this woman survive surgery just to die from infection. Sam, my brother died for lack of medical care on that beach. And you want me to give his enemy better care than he got?" "Your brother died because of war," Morrison said quietly. "This woman is dying because of childbirth. There's a difference, and you know it." There was a long silence. Then Fletcher spoke again, his voice rough. "All right, but I'm doing this because it's right, not because I like it." "Do it for whatever reason you need," Morrison said. "Just do it." Fletcher came back into the room carrying a syringe. He didn't look at Greta as he administered the injection, but his hands were gentle. She wanted to thank him, to ask about his brother, to say something that would bridge the gulf between them. But he was gone before she could find the words. The fever broke by evening. The inflammation began to recede. The penicillin was working. But Greta couldn't think about her own recovery. All she could think about was her daughter somewhere in this building, fighting for life in an improvised incubator. She asked about the baby constantly. Every nurse who came through, every doctor, "How is she? Is she breathing? Is she warm enough? Is she eating? Nurse Williams became her primary source of information. The baby was in the oxygen tent, Williams explained. Temperature regulation was difficult. The heating lamps helped, but the baby kept trying to go hypothermic. Her body was too small to maintain its own heat. Breathing rate was 85 per minute, very fast. The baby was working hard to breathe, her underdeveloped lungs struggling. She couldn't suckle yet. No sucking reflex at this stage of development. They were feeding her through an eyedropper, 2 cubic centimeters of sugar water every hour. Drop by drop, hour after hour. Williams stayed through the night that first night, feeding the baby every hour. Greta learned this later, heard it from another nurse. Williams had volunteered, had refused to leave the baby's side. On the second day, Greta asked the question she had been afraid to ask. Does my daughter have a name? She realized she hadn't named the baby yet, hadn't dared to. Naming her made it real, made it possible to lose someone with an identity, not just a hope. What would you like to call her? Morrison asked gently. Greta had thought about this during the long hours of labor in Berlin, during the journey across the Atlantic, during the days of waiting and fear. In German tradition, babies were often named after family members. Her mother was Johanna. Her sister was Clara. But she didn't want her daughter to carry the weight of the past. She wanted something new, something that represented hope. Anna, she said. Anna Margareta Kleist. Anna means grace. Margarete after my mother, but Anna comes first. Grace before the past. Morrison smiled. Anna. That's beautiful. I think it suits her. That night, the second night of Anna's life disaster struck. Dr. Fletcher was on duty in the medical facility monitoring patients. He checked on Anna every hour, watching the tiny chest rise and fall, counting respirations, checking temperature. At midnight, he noticed something wrong. Anna's breathing had changed, slower, more labored. He watched for 30 seconds, timing it, 60 respirations per minute. That was too slow. Should be 70 to 80, 50 respirations, 40, 30. She was turning blue. Apnea attack. The baby had stopped breathing. Fletcher moved on instinct, years of surgical training taking over. He opened the oxygen tent, lifted the tiny body out. She was so light, barely heavier than the towel she was wrapped in. He placed her on the examination table, tilted her head back slightly to open the airway, used the suction bulb to clear any obstruction. Nothing. Still not breathing. He rubbed her back firmly, stimulating the nerves. Come on, he muttered. Come on, little one. 30 seconds of no breathing. 45 seconds. Her lips were dark blue now, her skin going gray. Fletcher's hands were shaking. He kept rubbing, kept stimulating, kept talking to the baby even though she couldn't hear him, couldn't understand. Come on, breathe. Your mother didn't survive surgery for you to give up now. Breathe. 60 seconds, 75 seconds. His brother Michael flashed through his mind. Michael bleeding out on Omaha Beach, calling for a medic who never came. Michael dying because there weren't enough doctors, because the medical corps was overwhelmed because war consumed everything. And here was Fletcher using his skills to save a German baby while Michael's ghost watched. Breathe, he shouted, and he didn't care who heard him. At 78 seconds, the baby gasped. A desperate rattling sound. Then another gasp. Then rapid, shallow breathing, her chest heaving with effort. Fletcher stood there holding the baby, watching her breathe, feeling his own heart trying to hammer out of his chest. His hands were shaking so badly he had to sit down, carefully cradling Anna against his chest. Jesus, he whispered. Jesus Christ. He sat there for 10 minutes, just holding her, feeling her breathe, making sure she was stable before he placed her back in the oxygen tent. Then he walked outside into the Louisiana night, leaned against the building wall, and threw up. When he finally placed Anna back in the oxygen tent, Fletcher walked to Morrison's office. Morrison was still there reviewing patient files despite the late hour. You were right, Sam, Fletcher said quietly. She's not the enemy. She never was. I was just too angry to see it. Michael wouldn't want me to let a baby die because of what someone else did. He'd want me to be better than that. Morrison looked up, saw the tears on Fletcher's face, and simply nodded. Then be better. That's all we can do. Be better than the war made us. Morrison found him there 20 minutes later. What happened? Apnea attack, Fletcher said, wiping his mouth. She stopped breathing for over a minute. I thought we lost her. But you didn't, Morrison said quietly. No, Fletcher agreed, I didn't. But it was close, too close. They stood together in the darkness, two doctors who had spent the war trying to save lives while war destroyed them faster than they could work. "Why are we doing this?" Sam Fletcher asked finally. "She's German. The enemy. Why do we care so much?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. Catherine, his daughter, the little blonde girl. Her name was Catherine, Morrison said. "My daughter, she died 3 years ago. Pneumonia. I was deployed to North Africa. Couldn't get leave. By the time they sent me the telegram, she'd been dead for 6 days. 6 days and I didn't even know." He stared at the photograph, his thumb tracing the edge. "My wife blamed me. Said I chose the army over our daughter. She was right. I did. I thought saving soldiers was more important than being home with my family. I thought I was doing something noble." He put the photograph away. "I couldn't save Catherine, but maybe I can save Anna. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe it doesn't. But I have to try." Fletcher understood then. This wasn't about Germany or America. This wasn't about war or politics or nationality. This was about a man trying to redeem himself for a loss he couldn't prevent. And maybe Fletcher thought it was about him trying to do the same. On the fourth day, Greta was finally strong enough to leave her bed. Morrison and Williams helped her into a wheelchair, moved her carefully down the hallway to the room where Anna lay in her oxygen tent. The improvised incubator hummed quietly, heating lamps, casting a warm glow over the tiny form inside. Greta had seen premature babies before in Berlin. She knew how fragile they were, how many didn't survive. But knowing it intellectually and seeing her own daughter struggling for life were two different things. Anna lay on her back naked except for a tiny diaper they'd fashioned from gauze. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her breathing still labored. Her skin was less red now, more pink, but still translucent. Greta could see her heart beating through the thin chest wall, could count the rapid pulse. 130 beats per minute. "She's beautiful," Greta whispered. "She's a fighter," Morrison said. 4 days old and she's already survived things that would kill most adults. "Can I hold her?" Morrison hesitated. "She needs to stay warm. The oxygen levels need to remain constant. But I think we can manage it for a few minutes." He opened the tent, carefully lifted Anna out with practiced hands and placed her in Greta's arms. Williams wrapped a warm blanket around them both. The weight was shocking. 2 pounds, 4 ounces felt like nothing, like holding air, like holding a breath. But Anna was warm and alive, her tiny chest moving against Greta's body. Her miniature hand opened and closed, grasping reflexively at Greta's finger. Greta looked down at her daughter's face. The eyes were still closed, fused shut, wouldn't open for another week or two. But the face was perfect. Tiny nose, tiny mouth, tiny chin. Ernst's chin, Greta realized with a sharp pain in her chest. The baby had her father's chin. "Du lebst," she whispered in German. "Du lebst wirklich. You're alive. You're really alive." Morrison sat down in the chair beside them. For a long moment they sat in silence, doctor and patient enemy, an ally watching Anna breathe. "I don't understand," Greta said finally. "Why did you save us? I'm German. My husband killed American soldiers." Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then he told her about Catherine, about the pneumonia and the telegram, and the wife who left him. About 3 years of wondering if he could have made a difference if he'd been there. "Your daughter is alive because I was here," he said. "Because Dr. Fletcher was here. Because we had the resources, the knowledge, the equipment. In that moment, when we lifted her out and she wasn't breathing, I wasn't thinking about Germany or America. I was thinking, not this one. This one gets to live." Greta felt tears streaming down her face. "In Germany, at the end, we had nothing. No medicine, no doctors, no equipment. Women gave birth in bomb shelters and watched their babies die because we couldn't help them. My own country couldn't save its children. But you, the enemy, you saved mine." Morrison met her eyes. "I'm not your enemy anymore, Mrs. Kleist. The war is over. Germany surrendered 2 weeks ago. We're just people now." The words hit Greta like a physical blow. Germany surrendered. The war was over. The Reich was dead. Everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, it was all gone. And here she sat in an American medical facility with her daughter alive in her arms because the enemy had shown mercy. Over the following weeks, Greta began to understand just how vast the gulf was between what she had been told and what was true. The meals continued to astound her. 3 times a day, the mess hall served food that seemed impossibly abundant. Bacon and eggs for breakfast, fried chicken or roast beef for lunch, pork chops or meatloaf for dinner, fresh bread, real butter, milk, coffee made from actual coffee beans, not acorns or chicory. She gained 12 pounds in 6 weeks. Her body starved for so long, soaked up the nutrition like dry earth soaking up rain. The other women experienced the same transformation. Hollow cheeks filled out. Dull hair regained its shine. Bodies that had been running on fumes began to function normally again. One afternoon in late May, Fletcher found Greta in the medical facility sitting beside Anna's incubator. The baby was 5 weeks old now, weighing 3 pounds and 6 ounces. Still tiny, still fragile, but growing. Thriving even. Fletcher had brought a radio, one of the small portable ones the soldiers used. He set it on the table beside her. Thought you might like some music, he said. Something besides the medical equipment humming. He turned it on, tuning through static until he found a station. Music filled the room. Big bands, sound horns and drums, and a smooth male voice singing. Glenn Miller Orchestra, though Greta didn't know that. This is American music, she asked, Jazz Fletcher said. Swing music. Very popular here. They sat together listening. After a while, a baseball game came on. The announcer's voice, rapid and excited, calling plays Greta didn't understand. Fletcher noticed her confusion and started to explain. So there are 9 innings, he said. Each team gets a turn at bat. The pitcher throws the batter, tries to hit it. If he hits it far enough, he runs around these bases. He grabbed a piece of paper and drew it a diamond shape marking the positions. First base, second base, third base, home plate. Explained strikes and balls and outs and runs. This seems very complicated for a game, Greta said. Fletcher laughed, and it was the first time she'd heard him laugh. That's America. We make everything more complicated than it needs to be. But it's beautiful when it works. He told her about going to games with his brother Michael when they were kids. Sitting in the bleachers at Fenway Park eating hot dogs, keeping score on little cards. The smell of grass and popcorn and summer. He caught himself, realized he was smiling, talking about his brother without the usual weight of grief. He looked at Greta and saw her smiling, too interested, asking questions about the rules. Michael would hate this, he said quietly. Me teaching a German woman about baseball. Would he, Greta asked? Fletcher thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. Before the war, Michael wanted to be a teacher. He liked explaining things to people. He was patient with kids, with anyone who didn't understand something. Maybe he wouldn't hate it. Maybe he'd understand. The next day, Nurse Williams brought Greta a bottle of Coca-Cola, ice-cold beads of condensation running down the glass. American medicine for new mothers, Williams said with a smile. Helps with energy. Greta had never tasted Coca-Cola. She'd heard of it, seen the advertisements in magazines before the war, but it had never been available in Germany. She took a cautious sip. The bubbles exploded on her tongue. Sweet, overwhelmingly sweet, with a strange bitter edge underneath. Cold, actually cold, with real ice. She hadn't had ice in 3 years. In Berlin, ice was a luxury no one could afford. Here they put it in a drink and called it casual. She drank it slowly, savoring the abundance, the casual waste of it. A bottle of Coca-Cola with ice, given to a prisoner. In Berlin, we drink coffee made from acorns, she told Williams. And you have this. Williams sat down beside her, thoughtful. Yeah, we have this. We have a lot of things. Too much, probably. Most of us don't even think about it anymore. It's just normal. That's what shocked Greta the most. Not that Americans had abundance, but that they took it for granted. That a cold Coca-Cola with ice was considered nothing special. That fresh meat at every meal was expected. That hot water and clean sheets and medical care were just assumed to be available. Everything Nazi propaganda had told her was backwards. Americans weren't starving and desperate. They were prosperous, almost beyond comprehension. And they were using that prosperity not to crush their prisoners, but to care for them. In early June, a letter arrived from Germany, from Greta's mother, Johanna. The envelope was thin, the paper inside written in cramped handwriting, every inch of space used to save paper. My dear Greta, it read, your sister Clara died March 20th. Starvation and typhus. She was 19 years old. We buried her in the rubble behind what used to be St. Michael's Church. I am sick now too. Tuberculosis. There is no medicine. The hospital is a crater. I cough blood every morning. But I thank God you and the baby are alive. That's all I have left, the knowledge that somewhere my daughter and grandchild survived. Tell the baby about us. Tell her we weren't monsters. We were just people who believed the wrong leaders. Mother. Greta read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the weight of it settle heavier on her chest. Clara was dead. Her baby sister, 19 years old, starved to death while Greta ate fried chicken. She was sitting in the mess hall when she read it, a piece of apple pie in front of her. Dessert. They served dessert. While her sister ate grass soup and died, the guilt was crushing, suffocating. She pushed the pie away, unable to look at it. Elsa found her there an hour later, still sitting, still staring at the letter. Bad news from home, Elsa asked gently. My sister is dead, Greta said. Starvation. And I'm eating POW. Elsa sat down across from her. She didn't offer platitudes, didn't try to make it better. She just sat. After a long silence, Greta spoke again. How do I accept this? How do I accept their mercy when their bombs killed my sister? Their bombs didn't kill your sister, Elsa said quietly. Starvation killed your sister. The war killed your sister. The Nazis who started the war killed your sister. These doctors here, they're trying to save life. That's more than our own government did. Greta knew she was right. Logically, intellectually, she knew. But the guilt remained sharp and unforgiving. By the end of June, Anna was 8 weeks old, 4 pounds, 14 ounces. Breathing independently, no longer needed the oxygen tent full-time. She could nurse now, though Greta's milk production was limited from months of malnutrition. They supplemented with formula, a powder William showed her how to mix. Anna's eyes had opened at 6 weeks. They were blue, though Morrison said they might change color later. She tracked movement, now followed Greta's face when she moved. Grasped Greta's finger with surprising strength. She's going to make it, Morrison told Greta one morning during an examination. I didn't think so at first. I thought we'd lose her in the first week. But she's stubborn, like her mother. Greta felt tears welling up again. She cried so easily these days. Everything made her cry. Joy at Anna's progress, grief over her sister, gratitude towards these American doctors, guilt over that gratitude, confusion over what it all meant. Dr. Morrison, she said. Why do you check on her so often? You could delegate this to the nurses. But you come yourself 3-4 times a day. Morrison looked at Anna, not at Greta, because she's my patient, and because every time I see her breathing, thriving, growing, it reminds me that sometimes we do win. Sometimes life beats death. That's rare enough to be worth celebrating. He adjusted Anna's blanket, his hands gentle. Your daughter is proof that we can be better than the war made us. That's important to remember. In late July, Morrison called Greta to his office. He had news, he said. Repatriation schedules were being finalized. The first group of prisoners would return to Germany in September. Your name is on the list for January, he said, January 15th. Greta felt her stomach drop. January, 6 months away. It felt both too soon and too far. What will we find there, she asked. Morrison didn't sugarcoat it. Ruins, no infrastructure, food shortages, very limited medical care. Infant mortality is high. Your mother's tuberculosis, if she's still alive, there's likely no treatment available. And if we stay here, Morrison leaned back in his chair, I can delay your repatriation. Medical necessity. Anna is technically still premature, still requires specialized monitoring. That's not entirely a lie. She's doing well, but she's not fully caught up developmentally. Or he continued, you could stay permanently. I can hire you as a civilian nurse. The Army needs German-speaking medical staff for the occupation forces. You'd work here, earn a salary, have housing. Anna would grow up in America. Greta stared at him. Stay in America, permanently. Raise her daughter here in this land of abundance and mercy and Coca-Cola. Never return to Germany. Never see her mother again if her mother was even still alive. I can't make that decision right now, she said. I know, Morrison said. Think about it. You have time. But Greta knew she didn't really have time. Every day that passed was another day her mother might die. Another day, Germany fell further into chaos. Another day, Anna grew stronger in American care she wouldn't receive in Berlin. In August, Anna was 4 months old, 10 pounds, meeting milestones, sitting with support, babbling, smiling. She smiled at everyone, Morrison and Fletcher and Williams and Elsa, and all the other women who cooed over her. She was happy. How could a baby who had fought so hard for life, who had been born dying, how could she be so happy? Greta watched her daughter play with a rattle Williams had carved from wood, and she thought about choices, about staying or going, about duty to her mother versus duty to her daughter, about whether accepting American mercy meant betraying Germany or just choosing life over death. She thought about her sister Clara dead at 19 from starvation, about her mother coughing blood in a Berlin basement, about her husband Ernst buried somewhere in the rubble of Dresden. And she thought about Dr. Morrison, who saved Anna to redeem himself for the daughter he couldn't save, about Dr. Fletcher, who chose to care for a German baby despite his brother dying on Omaha Beach, about Nurse Williams, who spent sleepless nights feeding Anna drop by drop because she believed every baby deserved a chance. The enemy had saved her daughter, had shown more mercy than her own country could manage, had proven that humanity could transcend hatred. What did she owe them? What did she owe Germany? What did she owe the ghosts of the dead? In September, the first repatriation group departed. Greta stood with Anna in her arms and watched them board the trucks. Elsa was among them. They embraced goodbye, both crying. "Tell them," Elsa said. "Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them the Americans saved German babies. Tell them we weren't tortured or starved or killed. Tell them the truth." "I will," Greta promised. But she wondered if anyone would believe it. If anyone in ruined, starving Germany would believe that American enemies had performed emergency surgery on a dying German woman and saved her premature baby. If it would sound like collaboration, like betrayal, like lies. In October, a second letter arrived from her mother. Shorter this time, the handwriting shakier. "I am dying," it said simply. "The doctors give me weeks, maybe a month. Please come home so I can meet my granddaughter before I die. Please, Greta, I have nothing left but this one wish." Greta held the letter and knew her decision had been made for her. Her mother was dying. She had to go back. She had to let Johanna meet Anna, had to give her mother that final gift. Even if it meant taking Anna to a place where babies died from cold and hunger and disease. Even if it meant leaving behind the safety and abundance of Camp Beaumont. Even if it meant risking everything they'd fought so hard to save. She told Morrison her decision in November. He nodded, unsurprised. "I'll prepare everything," he said. "Medical files, supplies, letters of recommendation. Everything Anna might need." Over the next 2 months, he assembled a package that was worth a fortune in post-war Germany. 6 months of powdered formula, vitamins, antibiotics, penicillin tablets precious beyond measure, bandages and antiseptics. A complete medical file documenting Anna's birth and every treatment she'd received. Fletcher contributed a photograph. Greta holding newborn Anna in the recovery room, both of them alive despite everything. The date written on the back, April 23rd, 1945. "So Anna knows how hard you both fought," he said. Williams gave her addresses. "Write to us. Let us know you're safe. Let us know how Anna is doing. Promise me." Greta promised. On January 12, 1946, she boarded a ship bound for Bremen with Anna in her arms. Anna was 9 months old now, healthy and strong, meeting all her milestones. She could sit up on her own, could grab objects, could laugh. She laughed often, delighted by everything. Morrison, Fletcher, and Williams stood on the dock to see them off. Greta wanted to say something profound, something that would express the impossible gratitude she felt. But words weren't enough. They would never be enough. "You saved us," she said simply. "When you had every reason to let us die, you saved us." "Come back," Morrison said. "Any time. You and Anna will always have a place here. We're family now." The ship pulled away from the dock, slowly. Greta stood at the rail, holding Anna, watching the three figures grow smaller in the distance, watching America recede behind her. The place where enemies became family. The place where her daughter was saved by the people she'd been taught to hate. The place that proved everything she'd believed was a lie. Anna babbled happily, reaching for the seagulls following the ship. She didn't know they were leaving safety for ruins. Didn't know what waited in Germany. Didn't know that her mother was terrified of what came next. All Anna knew was that she was alive and the world was full of interesting things to see. Greta held her daughter close and prayed that would be enough. The ship arrived in Bremen on February 1st, 1946. Greta stood at the railing holding Anna, watching the destroyed port come into view through the morning fog. What had once been one of Europe's busiest harbors was now a graveyard of twisted metal and sunken ships. Skeletal cranes stood frozen at odd angles. Warehouses were nothing but burned-out shells. The smell hit her before they even docked. Rot and sewage and unwashed humanity. The smell of a continent that had lost a war. Anna wrinkled her nose and whimpered. She had never smelled anything like this. In Louisiana, everything had been clean. Pine trees and fresh-cut grass and the sweet smell of magnolia blossoms. This was different. This was the smell of defeat. The other repatriates crowded the deck, silent and grim-faced. Most were women like Greta. Some had children, though not many. The children who had survived looked nothing like Anna. They were thin, their eyes too large, and gaunt faces, their skins sallow. They stared at Anna with a mixture of wonder and resentment. Anna was chubby and pink-cheeked, wearing clean American baby clothes wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked fed. She looked healthy. She looked like everything their own children weren't. One woman spat as Greta passed. "American's pet," she hissed. "Traitor." Greta pulled Anna closer and said nothing. What could she say that she had almost died giving birth? That American doctors had saved them both when they could have let them perish. That mercy wasn't betrayal. The words would mean nothing here in this place where bitterness was the only abundant resource. They were processed through a makeshift refugee center, given identity papers and ration cards. Greta showed her medical documents, the thick file Morrison had prepared. The German official barely glanced at it. "Train to Berlin leaves in 2 days," he said mechanically. "Report to the station at 6 in the morning." Those 2 days in Bremen were Greta's introduction to the new Germany. She stayed in a converted school building with 200 other displaced persons. 30 women and children crammed into a classroom with no heat. They slept on the floor sharing thin blankets. There was one toilet for every 50 people. The water didn't run reliably. The food was a thin soup served once a day made from God knows what. Anna cried constantly. She was cold. She was hungry. The formula Greta had brought was precious, rationed carefully, but it wouldn't last forever. Greta mixed it with boiled water when she could get it fed Anna from a bottle, while other mothers watched with hollow eyes. Their breasts were dry from malnutrition. They had nothing to feed their babies. Greta shared the formula. She couldn't help it. A woman with twins, both barely alive, both making weak mewing sounds like dying kittens. Greta gave her 2 days' worth of formula. The woman cried and kissed her hands. "You'll run out," another woman warned. "Can't save everyone." "I know," Greta said, "but I can't watch babies starve." The train to Berlin took 4 days instead of the usual 6 hours. The tracks had been bombed, repaired badly, bombed again. They traveled in fits and starts, stopping for hours at a time while crews cleared debris from the rails. There was no heat in the passenger cars, no seats. People sat on the floor pressed together for warmth. Greta rationed the formula carefully. 1 ounce every 4 hours instead of the recommended 3. Anna cried with hunger. Greta cried with guilt, but the formula had to last. They passed through the German countryside, and Greta saw the scale of the destruction. Cities that had been industrial centers were now fields of rubble. Factories were hollow ruins. Bridges had been blown up, rivers choked with debris. Every few miles, another cemetery. Fresh graves, thousands of them. "This is what we fought for," an old woman said bitterly. "This is the 1,000-year Reich they promised us." Berlin was worse than Greta had imagined, and she had imagined it would be bad. 75% of the city was destroyed or uninhabitable. Mountains of rubble lined every street. Trümmerfrauen, rubble women, formed human chains to pass bricks from one person to another, slowly clearing the debris by hand. It would take decades to rebuild at this pace, maybe longer. Children in rags darted between the ruins, scavenging for anything useful. Copper wire, pieces of metal, unbroken bricks, anything that could be sold or traded. Some of them were barefoot, despite the February cold. Their feet were black with frostbite. Greta walked through streets she no longer recognized, carrying Anna and her small bag of possessions. The address her mother had given in the last letter was in what had been a middle-class neighborhood. Now it was a moonscape of destruction. She found the building by counting the ruins. 3rd pile from the corner, 4th pile from the church or what was left of the church. The building still had 3 walls standing. The roof was mostly gone. People lived in the basement. Greta climbed down a staircase filled with broken plaster and splintered wood. At the bottom, a heavy door. She knocked. A woman opened it. Not her mother, someone else. Suspicious eyes and a lined face. "I'm looking for Johanna Kleist," Greta said. The woman's expression softened slightly. "You're Greta. Your mother talks about you. Come." The basement had been divided into 12 sections using blankets and pieces of furniture. 12 families lived here, maybe 60 people total. No privacy, no space. The smell was overwhelming. Unwashed bodies in sickness and despair. Her mother was in the back corner, lying on a pile of rags that served as a bed. Greta barely recognized her. Johanna had always been a sturdy woman, strong and practical. The woman on the rags weighed maybe 80 pounds. Her skin was gray. Her breathing rattled and wheezed. Tuberculosis in its late stages. Mama, Greta whispered, kneeling beside her. Johanna's eyes opened, milky with cataracts but still aware. She saw Greta, saw Anna, and tears began to run down her sunken cheeks. "You came," she breathed. "You brought her." Greta placed Anna in her mother's arms. Anna, confused by this strange woman who smelled wrong and looked wrong, started to cry. But Johanna held her anyway, held her granddaughter with what little strength remained. "She's beautiful," Johanna said. "She's alive." How is she so healthy?" Greta told the story. All of it. The dying baby, the American doctors, the emergency surgery, the incubator, the months of care. She told it quietly, aware that other people in the basement were listening. Told it simply, without embellishment. Just the facts. Johanna listened, her breathing labored, her eyes never leaving Anna's face. "The enemy saved her," she said when Greta finished. "Our own people couldn't save Clara. The Nazis promised us greatness and gave us ruins. But the Americans, the people we were told were monsters, they saved my grandchild." She coughed, a deep, rattling sound that brought up blood. Greta wiped it away with a cloth. "I was wrong to believe them," Johanna continued. "We were all wrong, and Clara died because of those lies." She looked at Greta directly. "When did you stop believing in the right?" Greta thought about it. "The moment I tasted American bacon," she said. "The moment Dr. Morrison looked at me like I was a person, not an enemy. The moment Dr. Fletcher used his last penicillin to save Anna even though his brother died because of Germans." Johanna nodded slowly. "They showed mercy." "More than mercy," Greta said. "They showed me what we could have been, what Germany could have been if we'd chosen differently." "We didn't choose," Johanna said bitterly. "We were led by liars and monsters. We chose to follow them," Greta replied. "That's still a choice." They sat together in silence for a while. Anna fell asleep in Johanna's arms, exhausted from the long journey. Johanna held her, memorizing every detail. The soft blonde hair, the pink cheeks, the tiny fingers, the proof that something good had survived this war. Over the next 2 weeks, Greta watched her mother die. The tuberculosis was too advanced. Even Morrison's antibiotics only eased the pain, couldn't stop the disease. Johanna grew weaker each day, coughing more, eating less, fading. But she held Anna every day, sang German lullabies in a voice that barely worked, told stories about Greta's childhood, about Clara, about the family that had existed before the war destroyed everything. On March 18th, Johanna called Greta close. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. She didn't have much time left. "Listen to me," she said, each word an effort. "I'm dying. You know it. I know it. I have one wish before I die." "Mama, don't." Greta started. "Let me finish." Johanna interrupted with surprising strength. "Take Anna back to America." What Greta felt the world tilt. "No, I can't abandon Germany. Germany abandoned us," Johanna said fiercely. "The Nazis took everything, our sons, our husbands, our future. They left us with nothing but rubble and lies. You have a chance to give Anna something better. Take it." "But you," Greta protested. "I'll die happy knowing Anna will live," Johanna said. "That's all a grandmother can ask. Don't let my granddaughter starve in these ruins to honor a country that doesn't exist anymore." She reached up with trembling fingers and touched Greta's face. "Promise me. Promise me you'll take her back to the Americans. Promise me you'll choose her life over German pride." Greta was crying now, unable to stop. "I promise, Mama. I promise." Johanna smiled, the first real smile Greta had seen since arriving. Good, that's good. She died 2 days later on March 20th, exactly 1 year after Clara. They buried her in a mass grave outside the city. No marker, no ceremony, just another body among thousands. Greta stood at the edge of the pit holding Anna and felt something inside her break and reassemble. The last tie to Germany was gone. Her mother had given her permission, had begged her to choose America, to choose life over loyalty to ruins. She went back to the basement and gathered her few possessions. The other families watched silently. They knew what she was doing. They knew she was leaving. One woman, the one with the twins, stopped her at the door. "Take us with you," she begged. "Please, my babies are dying. I can't." Greta said, her heart breaking. "I can barely get myself and Anna out." "I'm sorry." The woman nodded, understanding but devastated. "Then go. Go quickly before you change your mind. Go live for all of us who can't." Greta walked to the American sector headquarters in Berlin. It took 2 days to get there, walking through the ruins with Anna on her hip. She asked for directions from British soldiers, from other refugees, from anyone who would listen. When she finally found the building, she was almost too tired to speak. An American sergeant at the desk looked up from his paperwork. "I need to send a telegram," Greta said in halting English. "To Louisiana, to Dr. Samuel Morrison at Camp Beaumont." The sergeant raised an eyebrow but reached for a form. "What's the message?" Greta thought for a moment, then dictated carefully. "Dr. Morrison, mother died, will accept job offer if still available. Please advise." Greta Kleist. The telegram was sent that afternoon. The reply came 3 days later. "Offer stands. Come home. Passage arranged. You and Anna will always have a place here. We're family now. Morrison." Greta read it 5 times. Come home. He had written come home, not come back. Home. As if America was where she belonged now, as if she had never really been the enemy, as if family could be chosen, not just inherited. The American military arranged her passage. They were efficient about it, matter of fact. She was a civilian employee now hired sight unseen on Morrison's recommendation. She would work as a nurse at Camp Beaumont. They gave her money for the journey. Real American dollars. More money than she had seen in 5 years. The ship left from Hamburg in late May. Greta stood on the deck with Anna in her arms, watching Germany disappear behind them. The ruins, the starvation, the endless gray despair. It faded into the mist, and she felt no regret, only relief and grief. And something that might have been hope. Anna was 11 months old now, walking with support, babbling constantly in a mixture of German and the English words she remembered from Louisiana. She had no idea they were leaving, no concept of countries or choices or the weight of what it meant. But Greta knew. She was choosing America over Germany, choosing the people who had saved her daughter over the people who had failed them, choosing life over death, hope over despair, mercy over bitterness. She was choosing to believe that Dr. Morrison was right, that they were just people now, that the war was over and what mattered was building something better from the ruins. The crossing took 12 days. Anna got stronger every day, fed on proper rations, sleeping in a warm cabin. By the time they reached New Orleans, she had gained 2 pounds. She laughed often now, delighted by the seagulls and the waves and the constant motion of the ship. Morrison and Fletcher met them at the dock on June 14, 1946. Greta saw them from the ship's railing. 2 men in civilian clothes, now the war behind them. Morrison's hair was a little grayer. Fletcher had gained weight, looked less haunted. They were smiling. Anna saw Fletcher and shrieked with joy. She remembered him, held out her arms and yelled in her baby voice. "Up, up!" Fletcher's face crumpled. He climbed aboard the moment the gangplank was lowered, took Anna from Greta's arms and held her, while crying openly. "Welcome home, little fighter," he whispered. "Welcome home." Morrison embraced Greta. No words needed. She had made the choice. She had come back. That said everything. The apartment Morrison had arranged was small but perfect. 2 rooms in the town of Beaumont, 10 minutes from the camp. Running water, electricity, a stove that worked, windows with glass, a bed with a real mattress, luxuries beyond measure. Greta started work at the camp medical facility in July. It was strange at first being staff instead of prisoner, wearing a nurse's uniform instead of prisoner's clothes, having keys, having authority. But Morrison and Fletcher made it easy. They treated her as a colleague, valued her experience, listened to her opinions. The other nurses accepted her quickly too. Sarah Williams became a close friend. They had coffee together every morning before shifts, talking about everything and nothing. Anna, the war, the future, recipes, movies, the mundane details of life that felt precious after so much loss. Anna thrived. She attended daycare on the base with American children, learned English faster than German now, called Morrison Uncle Sam and thought it was hilarious, called Fletcher Uncle Robert and climbed on him like a jungle gym, called Williams Aunt Sarah and begged for cookies. She was American now, more American than German, and Greta was glad. In September 1948, Greta became an American citizen. The ceremony was held at the Beaumont Courthouse. Morrison Fletcher Williams and a dozen other people from the base attended. Anna, now 3.5 years old, sat in the front row holding a small American flag. The judge read the oath. Greta repeated the words, each one heavy with meaning. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. Renouncing Germany, it hurt. Even now, even after everything, it hurt. She was erasing part of herself, cutting away her past. But Anna squeezed her hand, and the pain became bearable. The next generation was American. That was enough. After the ceremony, Morrison gave her a gift, an envelope with her name written in his careful handwriting. Inside a letter. Dear Greta, it read, 3 years ago I saved your daughter's life because I couldn't save my own. I thought that would be the end of the story, a moment of redemption, and then we'd go our separate ways. But you came back. You chose to stay. You became family. And in doing so, you saved me too. You gave me a reason to believe that good can come from terrible things, that mercy matters, that the choices we make echo forward in ways we can't predict. Anna is proof of that. Every day, she grows stronger, smarter, kinder. Every day, she reminds me why the work matters, why we fight so hard to preserve life. Thank you for trusting me with the most precious thing in your world. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being family. Sam. Greta folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. She would keep it forever, would show it to Anna someday when she was old enough to understand. The years passed, Anna grew. She was bright and curious and stubborn. She excelled in school, made friends easily, laughed often. She knew her story, knew about the emergency surgery in the incubator and the doctors who saved her life. Morrison made sure of that. He told her the whole truth, about the dying baby, about the choice he and Fletcher made, about her mother's courage. At age 8, Anna had to give a presentation at school about her family history. She stood in front of her third-grade class with a poster board covered in photographs. My name is Anna Kleist, she said in her confident American accent. My mama is from Germany. My papa died in the war. But I was born here in Louisiana in a prison camp because American doctors saved me when I was dying. She showed the photograph Fletcher had given them. Greta holding newborn Anna, both alive against all odds. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Fletcher are my heroes, Anna continued. They showed mercy when they could have shown hatred. They chose life when they could have chosen revenge. They saved me even though my country and their country were enemies. Because people aren't enemies. Countries might fight wars, but people are just people. Her teacher had tears in her eyes. Several students asked questions. How small were you? Did it hurt? Are you really American if you were born German? Anna answered patiently, explaining about premature birth and citizenship and identity. At the end, one boy raised his hand. My grandpa fought Germans in the war. He says they were all bad. Anna looked at him seriously. My mama was German. Dr. Morrison saved her anyway. Because she wasn't all bad or all good. She was just a person. We're all just people. The teacher used it as a lesson for the whole class, about prejudice and humanity and the importance of seeing individuals instead of categories. Anna's presentation went into the school library as an example for future students. In 1967, Anna was accepted to Tulane Medical School. Morrison, now 80 years old and fully retired, attended her white coat ceremony. He sat in the front row with Greta and Fletcher and Williams, all of them older now, but still family. When Anna received her white coat, Morrison stood and applauded until his hands hurt. This was why. This moment. This girl who shouldn't have existed, who should have died in April 1945, was becoming a doctor. The legacy continued. After the ceremony, Morrison gave Anna his stethoscope, the same one he had used to listen to her dying heartbeat in 1945, the same one he had used for 30 years of practice. "You've earned this," he said. "Use it better than I did." Anna took it with reverence. "I want to save babies like you saved me," she said. "I want to show the same mercy you showed Mama." Morrison smiled. "Then you're already a better doctor than I ever was." Anna specialized in obstetrics, high-risk pregnancies, premature births, the cases other doctors wouldn't touch, the mothers everyone said wouldn't survive, the babies everyone said were too small, too early, too fragile. She saved them, not all of them. Medicine has limits. But she saved enough. She opened a clinic in New Orleans that treated refugees and immigrants and uninsured women. One day a week she worked for free. The same mercy shown to her mother paid forward to strangers. In 1980, Camp Beaumont was converted into a historical site. The medical building was preserved as a museum. On April 23rd, the 40th anniversary of Anna's birth, they held a dedication ceremony. 4 generations stood together for the photograph. Morrison, 98 years old and frail, but still sharp. Greta, 64 and gray-haired but healthy. Anna, 40 and successful. And Anna's daughter, Sophie, 12 years old and already talking about becoming a doctor like her mother. Fletcher was there too, 85 now, retired in Boston, but flew down for the occasion. Williams at 85, widowed but surrounded by grandchildren. Other nurses who had worked at the camp. Other prisoners who had been saved by American medicine. A plaque was unveiled on the medical building, in memory of the children born in captivity, 1943 to 1946. May their lives remind us that mercy transcends war. Medical staff, Dr. Samuel Morrison, Dr. Robert Fletcher, Nurse Sarah Williams. Anna gave a speech. She had prepared carefully, wanting to get it right. The audience was mostly older veterans and their families, people who remembered the war, people who had fought in it. 40 years ago today, she began, "I was born in this building. My mother was a German prisoner. I was dying inside her. The war had just ended, but hatred still burned hot. Dr. Morrison and Dr. Fletcher could have let us die. They would have been justified. My father's army had killed their countrymen, but they chose differently." She paused, looking at Morrison and Fletcher in the front row. They chose to see a dying baby, not a German baby. They chose to see a suffering mother, not an enemy prisoner. They chose mercy when hatred would have been easier. That choice echoes through generations. I exist because of it. My daughter exists because of it. My future grandchildren will exist because of it. One act of mercy, one decision to save life instead of taking, it ripples forward through time, creating families and futures and hope. That's the America I believe in. Not the America that drops bombs, but the America that saves babies. Not the America that hates enemies, but the America that turns enemies into family. My mother taught me that humanity doesn't stop at borders. Dr. Morrison taught me that medicine doesn't recognize nationality. Dr. Fletcher taught me that we can be better than our grief. If you remember one thing from this story, remember this. Mercy is always a choice, and that choice always matters. The applause was long and loud. People were crying, veterans and widows and children who had never known war but understood its cost. Morrison stood leaning heavily on a cane and embraced Anna. "You were my redemption," he whispered. "You were proof that some good can come from all that horror. You were the choice to be better." The photographer captured the moment. 4 generations. Morrison holding Sophie, Greta with her arm around Anna, Fletcher and William standing beside them. A family created by mercy, sustained by choice, proof that enemies can become something better. Morrison died 2 years later at age 90. His last words were, "Tell Anna I'm proud of her." Fletcher made sure she knew. Fletcher himself died in 1999 at 89. He never stopped carrying his brother Michael's photograph, but he also carried Anna's baby picture in the same wallet. Both brothers, he used to say. One I lost, one I saved. Williams died in 2003 at 93. She had spent her retirement volunteering at hospitals, still feeding premature babies drop by drop, still believing every life mattered. Greta died in 2006 at 85. She was buried in Beaumont, not Germany. Her gravestone reads, "German by birth, American by choice, mother by miracle." Anna is 79 now, still practicing medicine part-time, still specializing in impossible cases, still saving babies everyone else says can't be saved. She has delivered over 3,000 babies in her career, hundreds of premature births, dozens of cases as desperate as her own. She carries her father's surname and her mother's strength. But most of all, she carries the legacy of two American doctors who chose mercy over hatred, who proved that one act of compassion can echo across generations, who showed that humanity was never really divided into enemies, only into people who remembered they were human and people who forgot. Because that's the story worth remembering. Not that enemies became friends, but that they were never really enemies at all. Just people who forgot for a while that on the other side of every uniform and flag and border was another human being trying to survive. And sometimes all it takes is one choice, one moment of mercy to help us remember. If this story moved you, please share it with others who need to hear it. Like and subscribe for more forgotten chapters of history that prove humanity's capacity for grace. And let us know in the comments, have you ever received unexpected mercy from someone you thought was an enemy? These stories matter. These moments matter. Because mercy always echoes forward, creating futures we cannot predict, but can always choose to build.